Hello, and welcome to the Two Real Cinema Club. I'm James Zika.
And I'm Andres Lorente. And on the Two Real Cinema Club, we watch a couple of movies, one new one and one older one, and we try to make some connections between the two while we talk about the films and cinema in general. And this week we are watching the 2022 brand new release of RRR from India, and going back and matching that with 1939's Gunga Din, featuring Cary Grant and Douglas Fairbanks, and big film in that year. And that year, I believe, Jimmy, was a big film year. That's Gone with the Wind and maybe Wizard of Oz and something else.
Oh, that's a lot. I did read that Gunga Din didn't get any Oscar noms, and the reason for this was because 1939 was such an incredibly strong year.
Yeah, big year for film. So Gunga Din was up against some big competition, and today we're putting it up against RRR. Combined
massive competition.
Oh God, 5 hours. 5 hours of films between the two of them. They've done most of it in the last 72 hours or something like that. Maybe 4 days, but I had to break it up a little bit.
Binge.
And of course, reminders to all of our friends on the internets out there. We are on Twitter at Two Real Cinema Club at twitter.com, Instagram at Two Real Cinema Club at instagram.com. We are blogging at tworealcinemaclub.com, and you can email us at tworealcinemaclub at gmail.com. And tell your lazy friends they can find us on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon, Listen Notes, Stitcher, something called Podcast Addict. We might not want your friends to hang out there very much. Deezer, Player FM, TuneIn, Podbean, and of course you can find us if you just put Two Real Cinema Club somewhere. I noticed that all of our handles are kind of Two Real Cinema Club, so we're pretty consistent that way.
You can find us.
You'd have to be very lazy or completely uninterested in us, which is understandable not to find us. All right, shall we strike out into the land of...
So the first film is I want to ask you before we even talk about it at all. How are you pronouncing that? Is it are you just is it RRR, or is it because there was a competition apparently to try and figure out what the three letters might stand for really? Before they released the movie. And so I think they ended up coming up with, I think for the English language or the Hindi version, it's something like Roar, Rise, Revolt.
You got it. Yeah, I wrote it down as Rise, Roar, Revolt. Oh boy, it's hard.
Right. Okay.
Anyway, it's a difficult name to pronounce. I say RRR. Otherwise, my trills are not that good. And then I was happy to see that there was some meaning to it. It comes about. Someone said that someone had written that the title comes in about 40 minutes into the film. I don't know if that's true. It does come in late. It does.
It's 40 minutes before the credits. Yeah. Awesome.
So at some point, about right around that time, I think, is when the title fully appears and they put out Rise, Roar, and Revolt. It could be Rising, Roaring, and Revolting, but that's a different title, isn't it?
It's even longer.
Yeah. And yes, the 3-minute trailer I thought was more than enough in many ways, and I was thinking to myself, boy, of course it's a 3-hour film. There's a lot that happens in the 3 minutes. It's a $72 million film, and it now has grossed more than all but one other Indian film, I guess, worldwide. Director is S.S. Rajamouli, who we'll talk about a bunch, I'm sure. And then writers were, Rajamouli was one of the writers, and then...
Vijayendra Prasad is his co-writer. Now, I'm not familiar with this guy's work at all. Apparently, he's like the biggest Telugu Indian filmmaker. Yeah. I've never seen none of his movies. I'm coming at this from the point of view of complete ignoramus.
Okay. Yeah.
In fact, the only thing I had heard was that the reason that the movie was called RR was because the initials of the two stars and the director are all R. So they are three big box office draws. And so when three of them were making a picture together, I think this is like the Indian cinema or the Telugu Indian cinema version of getting George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, and Harrison Ford all to kind of make the same film together.
Yeah,
and we know how that turned out.
Yes.
So there's a lot of excitement about getting these three guys all with their names beginning with R.
Yeah, it does. It is big. It's a big production. You get that sense immediately.
I mean, even from like the film company titles, like the sort of CGI animations that tell you, like we're used to in the West, seeing kind of Regency or Lightstorm or whatever. They have these kind of enormous, extremely elaborate little CGI logos for each of the companies. It starts massive and gets bigger, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And I mean, there are probably 5 minutes or more of opening credits, and a lot of that is just all the different production companies involved and where the money's coming from. So 72 million is obviously a lot of money, but they raised it seemingly nickel and dime at a time by all those credits. But came off. There's a very funny disclaimer at the beginning that none of this is true. They say that in the film. They have to make that clear. Very little of it is actually possible. So, of course, I knew that very little of it was true.
Yes, that's what they should have said. Not that very little of this is true, but very little of this is possible.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the two main characters share names with genuine historical people.
Yes.
But I don't think the film is making any attempt to tell their actual story or to pretend that it's like a biopic.
Precisely.
About real events that really happened.
And I read that online, that they perhaps... They may have lived concurrently, but there's no evidence that they knew each other or certainly worked together. So yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for people who haven't seen the film and haven't seen the massive trailer, what's it about?
It's about making an epic, I think. It's like intentionally creating something epic. The kids say that a lot now. It was epic. This is actually epic, yeah. It's broken into some sections early on, but unless I just fell asleep, you'll tell me if I missed later sections. There was one that said the story, I think that's right, and then the fire, and then the water. And then after, it seems like they're going to be, these all happened within probably the first 30 or 40 minutes. So I thought, okay, over 3 hours, I'm going to see like 10 or 12 sections, but I didn't see another one after the water.
No, so it was like ticking off the 3 R's, wasn't it?
I guess so, yeah. So what were the 3 R's again? What did I say? Revolt, rise, roar, and revolt. Oh boy. So it's pre-independence India. This is definitely an action thriller epic. And I think it's kind of a dual protagonist film. We have 2 characters. One goes by Akhtar or Bream, or at times they call him the Shepherd. And then you've got Raju, who's a police officer who also sometimes goes by Ram, especially when we get into his backstory as a kid. Right. And I got to say, I got a little confused, and I'll confess a little later on where I got crazily confused. But the names made it that much more difficult to follow. It wasn't terribly. There's not a whole lot of story to follow, in my opinion. So it didn't make it hard to follow the story and the plot. It did kind of make it a little bit difficult for me at times to follow who they were talking about when there was dialogue. But it also starts out with the inciting incident. There's this English power couple who are a woman, and then the sergeant is named, or the officer is named Scott, her husband.
It's Scott Buxton, isn't it? Which is incidentally the most popular brand of bottled water in the UK.
Oh, is that right? Buxton.
Yeah, so you can't visit Britain and go into a shop without seeing Buxton written all over the place.
Yeah, so I think, obviously that colonialism is all over this film. They're obviously in positions of power, and they're having this moment where this young girl named Molly is singing to them. And it looks like they're going to give her a little bit of money for the song, but what the misunderstanding is that the English couple is actually buying the child. And they take her away against her will, and certainly against the will of this village where they'd been visiting and where she was singing. And then Buxton says it's a waste of a bullet to kill the mother of this child. You don't want to waste all the energy and shipping costs and materials that went into this one bullet. You don't shoot a poor Indian woman with it. You save it for something more important. And this is kind of the one setup and payoff that we come back to a couple of times throughout the film.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the inciting incident, and Akhtar is, I guess, her older brother, Mali's older brother, the little girl's older brother, and he's sort of made it his mission to get her back through this sort of metaphorical language of he's the shepherd, he's going to search for the lamb, he's also going to kick a lot of ass during the search for her in order to get her back to the flock. We follow his story, but we're also taken immediately into Raju's story. He's sort of an officer, sort of protecting colonial rule, and he is going to sort of protect officers like Buxton. He's actually not stationed directly under Buxton at first, but he will protect them against the uprisings of some of the Indians who sort of are against colonial rule. And there's this amazing sequence early on where he battles thousands in this well choreographed. I mean, it's not my kind of scene, but it's amazing because he's just fighting. He's getting pummeled. He's surrounded by literally thousands of Indian men who just want to kill him, and he manages to fight them all back off. He gets this one person who's thrown something over the fence that he's protecting, and he brings him into British custody, and he's celebrated after that. It's an amazing bit of just kick-ass choreography. And it's in Gunga Din, you almost see something like it, but with the effects and the hours gone into the choreography, it's mesmerizing. I enjoyed watching it. I thought it was kind of ridiculous. I mean, a lot of this film is ridiculous, but it was impressive to see that happen.
I think as character setup, it completely does its job, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because, you learn so much about this character. And I don't believe he says a single word. I get the feeling there is not a single word exchange between him and anybody else in that scene. And yet you learn, everything you need to know for the rest of the movie about him.
Yep. Where all these
and the main thing that you learn is that, he is Iron Man, or, he's the Hulk or whatever. He's just unstoppable, incredible.
Yeah. But as a reward, he's going to kind of go after and try and go after the shepherd and try and find out who this person is and bring him to justice, because the rebels are sort of causing all sorts of problems for the British, who are these rebels who are trying to, fend off these people who are trying to get revenge for stealing away the little girl Mali. There's another fantastic scene. It's kind of the Act 1 curtain, save the cat moment, when there's this boy in a river. Akhtar's there, and Raju is also there. The boy in the river is sort of just at risk of sort of dying. The fires on river, train cars that are crossing this bridge are falling into the water. And there's this one moment where Raju, who's now sort of tasked with, he wants to become a special officer, and if he finds the shepherd and brings him in to justice, he'll become a special officer. And he communicates this outrageously detailed plan with Akhtar, who they don't know one another, but using gestures and some fantastic sign language that involves a motorcycle, a horse, a conveniently located and very long chain, and a flag. The two men are able to sort of swing at one another under the bridge, toss the boy and the flag between them, exchanging them, and save the boy. And their arms are connected, and it's just this bromance that begins right there. That's their meet cute.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Saving this boy, and then they immediately fall in love with one another. They become great friends, even though, unbeknownst to them, they are sort of enemies, because Raju's a British officer, and he's looking for the shepherd. And Akhtar, or Bream, as he is also known, doesn't know that. And I guess Raju at that time doesn't know who Bream is either, who Akhtar is, that he's the shepherd.
It's almost like a sort of Shakespearean level of setup, isn't it? It's like, they're like kind of, sort of star-crossed bromance lovers, and each doesn't realize that the other is the enemy. I mean, it's like a sort of perfect setup. I must say, I also absolutely loved that bridge rescue sequence, and I'm pretty sure there are 100 easier, less dangerous ways to rescue a boy from a river than the option that they chose. But it's it is magnificently over the top. And again, it's showing these guys are such astonishing superheroes. Yeah,
it's outlandish. It's a lot, and the stakes are high. So, should we call him Bream or Akhtar or the Shepherd? What do you think?
You know what? I've written Beam and Ram all the way through.
Beam and Ram. Okay.
But we could let's switch it around though. We'll randomly vary them in the spirit of the original filmmakers
to help our listeners. So Beam has to find his sister Mali, who's in British custody. She's been kidnapped, and Raju needs to find Bream and bring him to justice. So there's this wonderful little thing where they don't really know who the other one is, but they're in love with each other. It's just sure on bromance that we see montages of them riding horses and trains and motorcycles and burning tires together. It's just it's love at first sight.
And it feels like from this point of the film, they must be kind of like best friends for years and years, and yet also probably only about 72 hours pass. I think.
Oh yeah.
It's like it's just like it's instant. It's again that feels somehow kind of Shakespearean, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Akhtar sort of meets this English woman, Jenny, who actually is sort of harboring Mali. She's with her family. There's a big dance scene. It's kind of unbelievable. It's not really a convincing romance between Jenny and Akhtar because they can barely speak. I mean, he doesn't speak her language, or English, and then she doesn't speak his, so it's just a mess. But she invites him to a dance, and at the dance party, this is where it got into Baz Luhrmann territory for me. Akhtar's not very well received there. Neither is Raju, really. Seems like they're mostly surrounded by British colonialists there. It's just on this beautiful grounds and all that. But this happens in Indian films. I'm not used to it, but they just burst out dancing and singing.
They have like an Edwardian dance.
There's a dance off, yeah.
Just massive, yeah.
And ultimately, like they sort of together, Raju and Bream defeat all of the British guys, including the sort of the love interest competition for Jenny. And then at the end, Raju shows his love, but he sort of throws the competition to Akhtar, who wins. And Jenny falls in love with him even more at that point.
It's interesting that like having a dance sequence is, like a really common requirement for Indian cinema. But in this case, this is the only dance sequence of the film, isn't it? Apart from the end credits.
Yeah, end credits, yeah.
And it is, now, is this the right word, diegetic? That the music for the dance it is part of the scene.
Yes.
That there is actually a real band there, and there is somebody actually playing drums, and we're supposed to believe that this dance scene happens for real rather than it being like a metaphorical breakaway from the story.
Yeah.
I think that's probably it's actually, this is kind of like a step towards realism, I think, for the genre.
Okay.
I love the dance scene. I got to say, so the two actors, Rama Rao Jr. and Ram Charan, they have amazing figures, haven't they?
Yeah.
I don't want to get too bromancy, but kind of fantastic dancers.
Yeah.
And they're just really kind of fantastic magnetic presences on screen. Fantastic. Really enjoy watching them.
Yeah, the dancing.
Right, continue.
The dancing at times, it's hard to believe because it is so kind of, it's good. It's very, very good. But it's also just so kind of quick that I can't believe they're moving that well. But it ends up also sort of being this big set piece where the conflict comes between them. There's fire and water imagery again. And Bream bursts in. He's trying to sort of rescue. I think this is a later set piece, or it's the after party. I don't remember exactly what happened there. Do you remember that exactly? There was the dance off, and then Bream has to come back later he's got a plan formulated to rescue Mali.
Yeah, so like the dance off is him sussing out the palace.
Yeah, that's it. It's his sort of reconnaissance mission. Yeah.
And then they come back afterwards, at nighttime.
At nighttime.
For a different party.
And this is one of the things that sort of bothers me is a lot of things happen just because the filmmakers wanted them to happen. But there were lions and cheetahs and wolves and lots of wild animals running around too. And there was no setup for that at all. At one point, there is this tiger thing going on, and I think someone's feeding a tiger, but there were no elk in the setup. And all of a sudden, there's an elk there too. And it was wild. But it ends up being that Raju is able to capture Akhtar when he's trying to rescue Mali. Again, another epic battle. So these guys love each other, but they also beat the crap out of each other again and again, especially in this scene. And it ends up with Raju holding on to Akhtar, who's swinging by one arm and using the other arm to punch Raju repeatedly in the face. And this is sort of the end of it. It's kind of an Act 2 curtain for me, where their arms are joined together and they turn into fire and water. So the fire and water thing comes back. This is a super long movie, so I'm going to go into an Act 2B.
I think that little freeze frame where their hands turn into fire and water, I'm pretty sure for the theatrical release, that's the intermission. So I bet then, the movie stops and you go and phone your parents and buy some food, and have a chat and have a cigarette, and then come back for the second half. I'm pretty sure that must be how it works.
And I had read that for the American release, they have eliminated that. They eliminated something else too, but they eliminated the intermission. So that's like your classic interval moment or intermission moment. And it makes sense in hindsight. I learned that after the fact because the next part of the film is this major detour. It's actually sort of the Ram or Raju backstory. Yeah. And it helps us to understand that, yes, he's working for the British now, But his village was kind of wiped out by the British earlier, and his father had taught him sort of how to shoot. And it's the legend of Ram again. Not only could he kick ass, as an adult officer, but when he was a kid, he was an awfully good shot, and almost single-handedly he kind of repels the entire British contingent that was coming on their village. So his hatred of the Brits is kind of solidified then, and we sort of start to see, oh yeah, he's this undercover dude trying to be part of the resistance.
Playing the long game.
So it shows us a lot of things that we already know about him, how awesome he already was. But this gives some backstory, and also sort of backstory to his love interest from the village, who's going to come up later. So he's actually working for the rebels on the inside, or he's definitely sympathetic to some of the rebellious causes. But with Bream, he has to publicly flog him. This is a pretty sadistic scene in the film where he is just whipping his bromance partner there, and the Brits are they're treated pretty roughly in this film. They're just caricatures of just bloodthirsty colonizers, and so Scott's wife is saying, "I want more blood," again and again. So it gets to be this increasingly gory torture scene. But there's a song again. There's another song during the torture scene.
Not only does the wife want more blood, but she's brought her own custom-made whip,
God, yeah.
which she produces. And I thought that was awesome. Oh my God. She's had this thing specially commissioned, and she's just been keeping her in her pocket in case such an occasion would arise.
And it's sort of got tines in it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It looks like it could rip flesh right off the bone. So
It's like a prop from the Evil Dead or something, isn't it? It's
really,
so vicious.
Really bloodthirsty, I think. So he has to beat him. This is his great buddy who he beats up.
So he doesn't kneel, isn't it? This is
he never kneels. He's supposed to kneel and apologize. He never does that. So then they want to execute him, I guess.
And that's when Ram gets his letter saying that his long game is about to pay off.
Right.
Because his big plan is to be the guy looking after a consignment of rifles, so that he can distribute him to his guys. And tonight's the night when it's going to happen.
His promotion comes through, yeah. So he's got access to all these rifles. He's going to be able to arm the people against the overlords, the British. Yeah. There's this sort of late surprise where they each kind of get to save each other at their respective execution moments, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ooh. Yeah, there's a lot that happens in this film. They don't let logic or reason sort of hold them back. Akhtar ends up, because Raju actually tries to save Akhtar and succeeds. But then Scott is able to capture Raju. So now Raju is up for like an execution, and Akhtar now has a chance to save Raju, or Bream saving Ram. It's the same thing. And see the girlfriend love interest of Ram back from the village. She's able to deliver the news of this execution via a letter that comes to her, and that's kind of It was kind of a ridiculous setup and payoff that she knew it. She's actually saved Akhtar at one point, or helped to hide him. She's able to tell him, "Oh my God, they're gonna kill Raju, and Raju's actually on your side." So Bream finally finds out, "Oh, my brother is my brother. He's not the guy who was trying to flog me to death. He's actually trying to help me." So Jenny actually comes through here. So that connection is paid off by Jenny's able to get Akhtar into the barracks. He still doesn't speak much English. They still can't communicate, but boy, she gets him into this barracks where Raju's been...
She's got a map.
Yeah.
She's got blueprints.
It's
a proper Mission Impossible type heist scene, isn't it? Here are the blueprints.
Meanwhile, Raju has been put into this awful solitary confinements under earth with like a grill top for oxygen. He's bricked in. And this is, this scene where Akhtar starts knocking on the earth and a certain rhythm, something like that. And then Raju can hear him and he starts knocking back. And they're using this echolocation of sorts to find one another. It's completely over the top. And eventually they get closer and closer. And Akhtar is able to free Raju. And they sort of like fire comes back in. They're totally intently setting wildfire to fight back the Brits, which now that we're seeing lots of wildfire, it's a little insensitive, I think. But all the same, it's cool in a movie. So now
there's two great things I love about this scene, which one is that that Beam has turned up to the encampment, to the prison, for like a nighttime stealth mission, and he's wearing white trousers. That's a wardrobe mistake, isn't it? But it does lead to what must be cinema's greatest ever piggyback ride.
Oh yes, that's right.
The sequence that follows is just mind blowing.
Yes, and I think do they get right into some fighting with the Brits? And is that the scene? I've been waiting for this for most of my life. That someone actually uses a motorcycle as a weapon, which Bream at one point does. He uses a motorcycle.
Yes, swings it around his head and throws it at somebody. It's awesome.
Pretty amazing. And we'll talk about death and murder in this film, perhaps after I get through the synopsis here, because there's a lot of both. The resolution, Scott ends up getting killed with a bullet. It wasn't worth an Indian's life, but it sure as hell is worth taking out a Brit with, so they get even with him there. The Indian rebels sort of come off pretty savage and brutal too, so we'll talk about that. But it breaks into this crazy bit of patriotic nationalist propaganda at the end. There's this big song about raising the flag, and they mention water, land, and jungle. And this, at one point, the director comes out and dances and sings during end credits as well. That's S.S. Rajamouli again. So I just try to think of myself, or think of, I was trying to imagine Steven Spielberg coming out in the climax of West Side Story to sing "Somewhere There's a Place for Us" with the actors. And there's so many interesting cultural differences here that I'm probably going to want to talk about. But
it's almost like Spielberg coming out at the end of the film and singing a Kid Rock song while wearing a MAGA hat, isn't
That's true. Yeah, because it is. Yeah, it's very patriotic. It floored me. I was really caught unawares by that last moment. And then I was trying to figure out who is that other dude. And then I finally just looked up S.S. Rajamouli, and oh boy, yeah. See, just by comparing pictures from the internet and the film, took me a few minutes of research to do that. But who is that guy? Oh, he made the film. And in India, you can come out and dance with your stars at the end of the film. So that's as long as that's a nutshell version of this film. Everything and anything can happen at any time. And why don't I'll take a little break here and you throw in some thoughts, and then we'll come back and talk more.
I tell you what, you can probably guess from my responses so far, I thought this was absolute dynamite. I was grinning from ear to ear. I loved this film. I thought it was terrific, but it took me an hour before I started to figure out how to enjoy it. So for about the first hour, I was inwardly glancing at my reflection and saying, oh, "What am I watching? What just happened? Where do they get these actors? What's that? What the hell is going on?" And it was only after about an hour that suddenly I clicked into the right way that I should be enjoying the film. And I think it's a question of idiom, that I watched the first hour through the eyes of a Western cinematic idiom. Whereas actually, if you can adjust your vision and view this through an Indian cinematic idiom, suddenly the whole thing makes so much more sense. It's a very Indian film, and the things which are important to Indian cinema are done beautifully here, and the things which are not so important to Indian cinema are left at the wayside. So things like a lot of the British actors, I'm sorry to say, no disrespect, not that good. A lot of the British, the English dialogue is very strange. It took me a while to realize it's because they're not really speaking English. It's not even period English. They are speaking Indian idiomatic English. And these English actors have been told how to speak their lines in such a way that it's idiomatically correct for an Indian audience. I think the reason that this film can joyously give us a superhero story with people leaping 3 stories in the air, people punching tigers, and Ram at the end, he basically becomes like the Indian god of hunting. It's amazing transformation. It's very it's fantastical. It's very unrealistic, and that's fine because that's what these films are like, and that's what it's about. That's the key that you should enjoy it in. I was kind of thinking, I'd been watching the first hour as if I'd gone to a Rolling Stones concert, and I was saying, well, I can't even hear the violins. No one's brought a cello. Where's the conductor? This is rubbish. And whereas actually, once I finally realised, this is the Rolling Stones, I need to listen to the guitar. Then I started really enjoying it. I've had a thought about this afternoon, which is I think the reason that these two cinematic styles are so different is because of the origins of storytelling in Western and Indian culture. I think a lot of storytelling in Western culture, in British culture, kind of has its roots in the Bible, which people were and probably still are, told many of the stories of when they're children. These kind of Bible stories, influence a lot of the kind of the ingredients and the building blocks of the stories that we use and think about today. Whereas I think Indian cinematic storytelling could trace its roots back to something like the Mahabharata, which is far more fantastical. I mean, in the Bible, I remember as a boy being, a bit nonplussed that Jesus was going around doing miracles like turning water into wine. It seemed a bit, it's a bit underwhelming, isn't it? Whereas in the Mahabharata, people transform into animals, and people preserve their modesty with an endless dress, and people resolve debates or arguments with a competition for firing an arrow at the ceiling, and it's all kind of they're almost like Greek myths or Roman myths, quite exciting and fantastical, and full of all sorts of otherworldly elements. And I think that basis for cultural storytelling is what leads to a cinematic culture which has the same sort of flavour. I think if you can watch it as an Indian film, you can have a blast. And I think as an Indian film, it's astonishingly well made. I think like the mise en scene, so beautiful. The fire versus the water, the sheer number of bodies on screen, the number of bods, the number of extras. So I'm sure I've been pumped up with CGI, but it's still a lot of people on screen. It's so enormous. It's so massive. And you're never waiting more than 15 minutes for some sort of outrageous action set piece. So, for all those reasons, I thought it was just a blast. I got to the end of that and I thought, I want all my films to be like this. This is great.
Yes, epic, for sure. Intentionally epic, as I said at the outset. Yeah, I didn't like it nearly as much. I can't speak about it so enthusiastically, but you've raised the perfect point, is that you need to see it through a certain lens. And I don't know how well this is going to do it's on Netflix, I think. I don't know how well it does with the American audience in particular. But yeah, if you see it as just a sort of a classic Indian film, I guess, and an epic, I think, yeah, it works. It's definitely entertaining. I mean, I can't say that I was unentertained. And there's obviously this sort of anti-colonialist message there, which is pretty rough on the British. I definitely sense that. And you're right. They're not getting great British actors to do it. I don't think they really want great British performances. It's not that kind of film. So they're just very roughly drawn caricatures, and they serve their purpose. They're the antagonists, and there's no question about that.
I mean, we do have the rider at the beginning of the film saying this is not actually based on any historic events. And I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever that the British were at least as evil as the characters in this film, but they were probably evil in a slightly more sophisticated way. We will, probably, we'll kind of talk another time about the legacy of colonialism and how that has been reflected or not reflected in cinema. There wasn't very much good about the British Empire.
No.
We did a lot of terrible things. Yeah. And I say we in the very most loosely connected way. It's not like I or anybody else I know feels strongly connected to the people in this film. I don't think there's anybody who is watching a film like this and saying, well, my father ran a palace in the Raj and he did great work and I'm proud of all those men that he flogged. But it's our ancestors, or the people who lived in the country where I live a long time before I lived here, you did some very questionable things, and I don't think it's right to forget any more than it's right to start, asking, well, maybe the Holocaust didn't really happen. It's no. Bad things happen when we forget history. So we absolutely need to remember, and I think maybe this film is not necessarily over the top in its portrayal of the bad behavior of the British Empire. It just does it in a Indian cinematic literate way.
and in cinematic shorthand too. I mean, it's very
Yeah.
They're not wasting any time to try to develop character arcs for the British or anything like that. They're just presenting them as they are viewed as colonizers.
I know we like to talk about writing. I just because a couple of little things in this that I think the writing is not the star in this movie, but it does set up some very clear protagonists with very clear motivations. And at no point are you asking yourself, why is he doing this? Unless the film wants you to ask yourself, why is he doing this? Because the film knows that it will reveal the truth later. There was no point really when I was confused. I think it tells its story economically and very effectively. And one moment I really loved actually was when about a third of the way through the film, Ram is looking for Bean, and his lead is that he remembers there were flecks of colour on the fingertips of the man who he's looking for, and it's the first time I've ever just seen a block of colour used as a plot point. And somehow that feels, it's very Indian. The colours in this film are fantastic, and for them to use colour as a plot point, seemed like a witty, very pleasing tiny little sort of plot moment. I enjoyed it.
It stirred up memories about 30 years old for me because I used to live above this Indian convenience store in Montreal, and it was run by the sweetest woman and her husband. And every time I walked in there to buy samosas and just kind of eat them there, they were so delicious. They would have these ultra-violent, really glossy Indian action films on a television in the store. And this immediately took me back into Indian cinema in a way that I hadn't really been in years and years. But the cultural differences are really profound. I mean, they had no problems like shooting innocent children in this film or showing the body counts pile up. There are impalings. There are bits of dislocating of knees and shoulders constantly. I mean, there is just this running trail of violence, both from the Indian fighters as well as the British fighters, and it's just an intense amount of violence. And then they'll break out into song in the middle of it, or the love scenes are also kind of equally broad stroked. It's okay, love interest, bam. We're not going to go into too much detail. We're not going to develop the relationship very much, but these two people are in love. So there's just no fear of like showing violence for what it is, or even maybe showing how superficial love is too.
I mean, you're right. I don't think this film is not a victory for the gun control lobby, is it? No. Because the one of the protagonists, his main goal is to distribute as many guns as he can.
And I was just going to say, just sort of following up on your bit about how you need a different lens to understand it. I think India is a huge country, over 1 billion people, and there are a lot of different languages and a lot of different cultures within that. Right. So the end result is, I think you're producing films that are really going to be very broadcast, very wide appeal. And technically, I think there's a lot of dubbing in here, and it's probably because they know that they're going to have to dub it into a bunch of different languages. So
I think all the dialogue is post-sync, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
I felt like actually the English stuff, when it was specifically a one shot of a British actor, that was probably location sound somehow, but everything else.
Okay, all right.
But yeah, it was all done that way in order to be dubbed later on, and it just shows you that when you've got like a big audience like that. I mean, India's more than a country; it's almost like many different countries. You've got to produce things that are going to be entertaining to everybody. And again, there's not a ton of dialogue. There's not a ton of nuance. As you said just a moment ago, and I think I said it at the outset, like I was able to follow this story, even though at a couple times I was confused about characters, merely because it's a very straightforward story. It's well written for what it wants to do, and it's easy to follow. And again, that's probably an advantage if you're making a film not for a couple 100 million people, but possibly 6 billion people. So I don't know how well it's going to do like worldwide, but obviously it's going to do very well in India and probably on the international audience.
There is an Indian diaspora around the world, isn't it? That there will be a large contingent of Indian Americans,
North Americans for sure.
Who will queue up to see this movie. So I don't know. It has an audience. It has an audience.
For sure.
It's a big audience. When you and I were at film school, one of the things that people used to say was, when you're pitching a movie, try to think what's going on the poster.
Yeah.
Think what would you put on the poster, and then that's that then is going to become your pitch for how you explain what the movie is to somebody in 10 seconds. And I feel with this movie, maybe with the other movies recently, we've kind of moved into a slightly different area now, where the question you need to ask is not what's on the poster. The question is, what is the GIF that people will make from this movie to distribute around social media? Will it GIF? I think is going to be the question that people will ask. And my God, there's a lot of GIFs in this movie.
Oh my God, that trailer was, I was trying to, I watched the trailer, and I probably shouldn't have. I probably should have watched the film first. But just seeing the trailer, trying to figure out how much are they going to actually jam into this film? Like, how can all of that was in 3 minutes even fit into 3 hours? So it will be gift to hell and back, I'm sure. There's plenty of material there. Plenty.
What's the time limit for a GIF? Can you make a 3-hour GIF, do you think? Right, okay, let's take a break.
Yeah, let's take the break.
And then we will come back and talk about 1939's RRR, which is Gunga Din. Let's come back and talk about that. See you in a minute.
Jimmy,
Yeah.
you may not know this, but I happen to have mild sleep apnea.
No, really?
Yeah. Guess how many times I wake up per hour due to halted or interrupted breathing?
Per hour?
Per hour.
Is this at night, or is this during the day as well when you're at work?
This is... No, my students wake me up when I fall asleep at school. But no, this is mild. This is a case of mild sleep apnea.
I'm going to guess 4.
Ooh, multiply by 3.
No.
12 times per hour. Yeah.
So you sleep for like 5 minutes?
Yes. Yeah.
Oof.
So that means that before I sought treatment, I would wake up once every 5 minutes, probably 100 times per night.
So now I understand why you're so tired.
Well, hang on. As you can imagine, sleep was not restful for me. I was even scared to go to sleep, not knowing whether or not I'd ever wake up again. You don't want to end up in the big sleep accidentally.
Oh, man, yeah.
That was my case until my sleep therapist, who I never actually talked to or met in person or on screen. Isn't modern Americans just great, isn't it? Medicine here is terrible. This person, he, she, they, I don't even know what it was, prescribed sleep therapy with the Dream Station 2, a continuous positive airway pressure machine, or CPAP, from our friends and would-be sponsors at Philips Electronics.
Oh, our would-be sponsors.
Yes. Immediately after using the Dream Station 2, I noticed I was sleeping better and even needed fewer hours of sleep than before. Better yet, I really did feel I was stationed in dreams, having more vivid dreams and occasionally even more terrifying nightmares than ever before.
Wait a second, is that a feature or is that a bug?
That's a feature.
That's a feature, okay.
Yeah, because you're sleeping so well. You're in uninterrupted sleep, stages of sleep for longer. The Dream Station stirred deeply repressed failures, regrets, and embarrassments dating to my childhood years and all the way to the past few weeks. But I had more energy, could exercise more, and friends and family even commented on how well rested I looked, despite waking every morning with these gill-like impressions on my nose and throat from wearing the Dream Station's comfortable neoprene headgear, strapping all night long. It does sort of imprint the shape of the machine on your face, but that's okay.
Is it seriously called the Dream Station?
Yeah, Dream Station 2.
Dream Station 2. So why have they named it after a gaming console?
Is that what? Oh, like PlayStation?
That's what it sounds like.
Oh, they are not playing games. These guys are serious about ensuring that I have better sleep.
Oh, good for them.
I've experienced enhanced nocturnal erections, and other organs seem super inflated as well. And that stands to reason. With the Dream Station 2, I'm being continuously inflated by between 10 and 14 pounds of air pressure per square inch via the flexible and sound-deafening tubing.
I need to know where I can buy one of these products today.
Well, that sort of brings me to my next bit. Sadly, about 1 year ago, Philips notified me that the Dream Station 2 may or may not have been off-gassing carcinogenic fumes.
What?
Yeah, the 5
Oh
years.
my God, what?
Yeah, 5 years I was breathing through it 8 hours a night, 365 nights per year. And furthermore, due to supply chain problems, no replacement devices have been available. So now I've been breathing, or not breathing, carcinogens for 6 years.
Oof.
Yeah. I did have a piece of crap device from another company for a few nights, but it sounded like I was driving a Fiat through the Dolomites. So I went back to the loving tubes of Dream Station 2, carcinogens and all.
Yeah, I'm not sure we do want to be sponsored by these guys, do we?
Well, here's the good news. All this is to say that Philips Dream Station 3, I hope you are soon available in helping me to avoid heart attacks, suffocation, and premature death via a non-carcinogenic, non-off-gassing delivery system while providing me with the dreams and great sleep I've grown accustomed to. So Philips, feel free to prioritize a rush order to me in exchange for this free advertising. Here comes the motto, or mottos. Philips Medical Devices. We're on a nocturnal mission to bring you better sleep outcomes. Or, as I like to say, Philips, better living or perhaps slower, unnoticeable dying through modern electronics technology.
Oh man, if they haven't paid you for that slogan,
Yeah.
you need to phone your lawyer. That is such a great slogan. That should be seen on every Philips product.
Well, maybe they'll pick it up.
And welcome back. After the break, so now here we are. We're going to talk about Gunga Din from 1939, George Stevens' picture. Probably better known as the director of Giant, Shane, The Greatest Story Ever Told, sort of big, sort of early mid-period Hollywood director. And Gunga Din written by a whole bunch of people. So apparently the script written by Joe Sayer, who was a novelist at the time, and Fred Goy, who'd previously worked with Hal Roach, and you can see the Laurel and Hardy influence, I think, when you watch Gunga Din. Yeah. But from a story by Ben Hecht, who is one of the most notable Golden Age Hollywood writers. He wrote His Girl Friday, Gone with the Wind, like some of the great Hitchcock pictures like Spellbound and Notorious. And he wrote it with his regular collaborator, Charles MacArthur. And then you were telling me in the break, and I didn't realize this, but also William Faulkner has a writing credit on this movie as well.
He does. I don't know what, but he's in there.
So, I mean, what an incredible, stellar lineup of writers. I feel distinctly insecure. It's based on a Rudyard Kipling poem, blimmin' out, another great writer, When Will It Stop? And it's a reasonably straightforward black and white tale set in northwest India in 1880. So it's another movie about the Raj, like RRR, and in Gunga Din, the thuggy murder cult. In India, they're revolting against British rule, and we have three servicemen in the British Army and the Raj forces, Cutter, Ballantyne, and McChesney, who go to investigate this village which has been routed by the thuggy cult. So it's Cary Grant as Cutter. This is a year before His Girl Friday, I think. So very young, sprightly Cary Grant. Douglas Fairbanks Jr. as Ballantyne, Victor McLagan as McChesney. They turn up to the village. It all appears to be deserted until it's Cary Grant, isn't it? I think who finds a bunch of these thuggy cult members hiding out in this little room. And he's this one white guy who walks into a room with like 10 or 12 Indian men, and he immediately just says, "Oh, you're all under arrest. Come with me." At no point does the film imagine that three white men would ever possibly have a problem overcoming 200 brown people. There's a big old fight, quite an entertaining fight. Cary Grant is throwing dynamite here and there at random. A lot of stuff gets blown up. Eventually they escape by jumping into the river. But Cutter, it's Cary Grant's character, he wants to go back because Gunga Din, who is the company's water bearer, has told him about a city of gold. He wants to go back, pick up the gold, go home rich. His superiors don't want him to do that. He's put in the stockade. He breaks out with the help of an elephant. And Gunga Din leads him back to this golden temple. But surprise, surprise, this temple is the temple where the thuggy murder cult hang out. So Cary Grant sends Gunga Din to go and get help. He's captured. Then Ballantyne and McChesney, they come back to his rescue, but they all get captured. There's a bit of to and froing. There's a fight. The Brits know that they just have to hold out until the whole garrison will come and rescue them. But it turns out that that is the thuggy cult's motive behind the whole business. They've set up an enormous ambush for the British Army. They're waiting to massacre them. It's a big old fight. And at the last minute, at the 11th hour, Gunga Din, even though he's been injured and he's taken a bayonet to the chest, but he climbs up step by step to the top of the temple, gets his bugle, sounds the alarm, and warns the British forces about the massacre. So they're able to prepare. They storm the building. A whole load of people are killed, including Gunga Din. But eventually, the Raj wins, the cult is defeated, and Gunga Din is posthumously awarded the rank of corporal. And we get this little sort of fade-out image of Gunga Din's ghost beaming down on Cary Grant, saluting as he wears his British Army uniform. William Goldman, famously in both of his books about screenwriting, calls Gunga Din the greatest adventure film ever made. He says, I've seen it 16 times and I cry every time. But I think William Goldman was about 8 or 9 when Gunga Din was released. Now it's 80 years later. Does Gunga Din still play today? What did you think? Had you seen it before?
I had, yeah, on VHS.
Whoa!
Borrowed it on a videotape. We were talking about tape earlier. Videotape. I saw it on tape. From the library probably 20 years ago or something like that. I think I saw it. Well, yeah, Gunga Din is Goldman's favorite film, and I was reading his book, Adventures in the Screen Trade, for a class. And I decided if I could get it at the library, I would watch it, and I did. And I most of what I remembered was the ending. I don't remember the first hour and a half very well at all. Does it hold up? I don't think so. But I mean, the thing is that it engendered. You can't have Indiana Jones, I don't think, without Gunga Din. All these like action adventures and sort of it's a bit more of a caper film than your average American adventure film, but. I think it definitely put down the gauntlet for all these films to follow.
I was surprised. I had never seen it, and I was very surprised to see how much Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is almost a remake of this film, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
You know, they have the rickety bridge, and they have the temple, and they have the cult, and there are so many elements from this film that have been recycled into the Temple of Doom.
They have the snakes too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All those ingredients just lifted straight out of Gunga Din. I, like any sensible person, absolutely adore Indiana Jones. But it's fascinating to see, the source from which it sprang.
Yeah.
I agree that I think the most memorable bit of the film is this climactic climb of Gunga Din. To save the day. It's very exciting. It happens so slowly. You can see how injured he is. He's kind of slowly staggering up the side of the temple, and you know that he's a sitting duck up there, and it's a proper tragedy, and that is the most memorable part. I think the film does demonstrate some of the drawbacks of making a film out of a short extract from a poem. It reminded me a little bit of Where the Wild Things Are. Have you seen that? Which was the Spike Jonze adaptation of a children's book that was out a few years ago. And the children's book, it has like 11 pages or something, and only one line of actual words on each page. It's very, very little to the book. The book is wonderful. It's it's a joyous, very enjoyable book for sort of 7 to 8 year olds. But trying to stretch it out to a feature length film, you simply cannot squeeze enough out to make the material run that far. And Gunga Din felt to me a little bit like that. you do have the elements of the caper, the sort of the three kings type story of going out to find the gold, and and there are some proper scenes of threat with these the murder cult going through their rituals in this sort of candlelit temple, but there's quite a lot of strange buffoonery and clowning around, which I think kind of doesn't really fit in with the tone of the rest of the film. There's this great long sort of weird sequence with the elephant where they give the elephant some sort of elephant medicine, and the elephant seems to fall over, and then the elephant recovers, and then there's this kind of big scene where Cary Grant tries to sabotage this sort of this wedding celebration party. All sorts of kind of peculiar things happen, which sort of feel like maybe they were dreamt up to stretch the film out to 2 hours.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. And some of that is sort of the setup and payoff stuff that I think I mentioned a little bit earlier. Like there are a couple of sections of this film where Valentine's trying to get out of the army and he's trying to get married, and there's a long, it takes 5 or 6 minutes to set that up. With is it Joan Fontaine who's in this film? She's kind of in briefly. She doesn't have a whole lot to do, but introduces a whole character, and it does feel like they're just bulking it out. And then the elephant scene in particular, there's this long setup about the elephant medicine, and then Cary Grant is going to spike the punch with the elephant medicine to take out the potential replacement for Valentine, so that Douglas Fairbanks has to stay in the film. There's a lot of attention to set up some payoffs that really aren't that they're not that interesting, I guess. And before I was saying, okay, well, these lions and tigers and elk jump out of in this one scene of RRR, and there's no setup whatsoever. They're just paying off. And after listening to you talk a little bit about sort of the magical realism of things, that maybe those animals are sort of like representations of other characters or gods or whatnot. It makes a bit more sense. But the two films totally contrast in that sense, in that there's no wasted time. Even though it's a 3-hour, 5-minute film, in RRR, there's very little wasted time. They're doing something interesting visually or with song or dance without spending too much time on setups. Whereas this film does feel like there's setups in there that aren't really necessary. They're not that comic. And this is supposed to be kind of a goofball. There's a goofball undertone to this film, I guess.
Yeah.
That I think, and that's probably one of the reasons it doesn't stand up as well, is because the comedy just has changed in 80 years. And when I saw this film, I was really thinking, this feels like this feels like a Cowboys and Indians film, which is what it exactly is. Basically, it felt like an American West kind of epic, and it was shot in California. I mean,
it was all shot in California.
They're shooting it in California. So it's just a different. So we were talking about lens earlier. You have to look at this film, I think, a little bit with this Hollywood lens. Even though they're telling this bit of British and Indian history, they're shooting it in California. Cary Grant's an American practically by this point. Victor McLaglen's also been in John Wayne, with John Wayne and in some of the John Ford films, and by this time, so it's starting to feel like a Hollywood version of it. And it's funny how it all. It's all kind of impressive, but it doesn't all quite stick together, because I didn't laugh out loud too much, and the violent scenes, all the fight. There's a lot of fighting in this film. I don't know if they were supposed to be funny or not. I couldn't figure that out. Because a lot of people almost die but don't die. Gunga Din kind of dies, but then he's around for a few more minutes before he really dies. And Cary Grant, you think, oh, he's a goner at one point. And he's fine. So it's kind of...
He's fine.
Yeah, whereas in RRR, there's like a lot of very, very graphic violence and people are dying all over the place. There's a similar amount of fighting in this film, but very few like proper deaths, I think. I mean, they're just kind of...
Brown people are allowed to die.
Brown people do die, yeah.
Dozens of brown people who are sort of blown up or...
Yeah.
Or
so
killed.
I did end up being like a cowboy and Indian film, which I'd grown up with. I saw this on black and white television growing up all the time, so it started to feel that way. So that might be the right lens to look at this film.
It certainly has this kind of air of kind of unswerving British superiority, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That the Indian characters aren't they're no threat to our 3 white British soldiers.
No. Yeah.
It's like inconceivable that they could be a threat. That Cary Grant feels entirely confident.
Yeah,
saying to a room of 12 men, "You're all under arrest. Come with me."
Yeah.
And it's the same with the kind of the cultural superiority as well. When Cary Grant sees this temple covered with gold, he just sees a pile of gold and not a temple.
Yeah.
There is no acknowledgement that there may be Indian culture. It's just a big pot of money to be raided.
Yeah.
And and the film certainly makes no judgment. Doesn't ask you to make any judgment of that. It treats finding the temple the same way that it would treat finding a suitcase of money at the side of the road. With less respect even than that, isn't it? At least with a suitcase of money, you would think, well, I wonder if somebody's dropped this suitcase. Whereas, no, this is just sort of like a banking error in your favour, and suddenly you have a huge amount of money.
Yeah,
and not considering that they may be victims of this crime, or indeed that it's a crime at all.
Did you think of the film Three Kings at any moment during this one?
I did, absolutely. It really reminds me of Three Kings, which I presume, clearly has stolen its story from this movie as well. This is the movie for a lot of these more recent kind of action caper films that I was unaware of their origins.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that it's named Gunga Din because he's really he's a minor character, and he's definitely looked down upon, and I guess he rises at the end with this one massive gesture, and his story arc is kind of interesting, and he grows, but. I just wonder if there's another title.
He's played by Sam Jaffe, isn't he? Who's like an American Jewish actor.
Yeah.
And I presume, in fact, that very many of the Indian characters were just Californians in body makeup.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, regrettably, the Brits are in field helmets, uniforms, and all that. The Indians are generally in just cloth. I mean, and at times bordering on diapers. I mean, it's just it's humiliating.
Just walking around in their underpants. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I did watch. I watched the first half of the film with the whole family, and then everybody gave up on it at the midway point, and I was the only one who watched the final half. And the final half is certainly much better than the first half.
It is. Yeah.
Although my children haven't seen Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and so they wouldn't be able to get the joy that I got from recognizing those little references.
Yeah, references. Now, did you say? The name of the rebels were he says thugs a lot in the film. They said thugs.
I thought it was the Thuggy cult.
Cult.
When I looked it up, it was THUGGE.
Oh, okay, Thuggy.
But maybe I don't know whether the H is silent and it's Tuggy.
And then this one had an interesting disclaimer at the beginning too about that they're following the goddess Kali. I believe they're all followers of the...
Yeah, exactly. And that part is true.
That part is true, yeah. So there's, in RRR, they're saying, look, none of this really happened. And it couldn't have. And then in this film, I think stuff could have happened. And they're saying, well, yeah, it's based on fact. Like, this is what the Kali followers were like, or something like that. Sort of gave a permission structure, I think, to dress them the way they do in the film, and then kick their asses throughout.
Yes. Yeah, it's all right. It's all right to massacre them. Because they're bad.
Yeah.
So I found this film a little bit difficult to watch. And I was surprised that it wasn't more engaging, given that it's so influential. And I, like you, have read those Goldman books and was kind of looking forward to seeing what he's hyped up as the greatest adventure film of all time.
But I would interject just that he saw this about the same. You're right, 8 or 9 years old is what I calculated. He saw this about the same time I saw Star Wars. So I'm thinking this is his Star Wars, which is a film. Star Wars is a classic. I like that first one and all that. But I sort of a note on Goldman when I was thinking about this is like he has the benefit of seeing that with those sort of childlike, non-critical eyes. So the first time I saw this, I was definitely in my 30s, and now I'm even older than that. And it's hard to fall in love with this film as an adult. And I think, in this post-woke period, especially, it's hard to really agree with a lot of what's happening.
I've seen people asking online after seeing RRR, asking, oof, were the British really that bad? I don't know whether if there had been a Reddit at the time of Gunga Din's release, would people have been asking, oof, were the Indians really that bad?
Yeah.
Maybe it is. Maybe it's a simple flip. So you're going to recommend anyone to go and see Gunga Din after your original VHS viewing, and then this repeat one now?
Only if you've got a VCR and can get it on VHS. I think it's important to know some of the classics, and as we've just pulled 2 other modern films out of Gunga Din. So I think It's worth it. I don't think it's a great film. It came out in a year that produced also Stagecoach as well as Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind. So there were a lot of films that year. So there was obviously a lot going on. And it's a big film for 1939. I was amazed with the exteriors they used in California.
Yeah. I think the budget was like of the order of $2 million, wasn't it? I think, which is it's a
fair bit of money.
A fair bit of money in 1939.
Yeah. So the thing is, there's some beautiful visuals in it. It doesn't hold up just on pictures as well as like RRR does. I mean, there's a lot of visual stuff that I can watch and be entertained by in RRR, but in Gunga Din, I don't think there's that much that's just absolutely riveting visually. So it doesn't hold up as just film, just as pictures, but it's probably worth seeing if you're interested in the classics and seeing William Goldman's favorite film as a kid.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
maybe it's good to know, where you came from. But yeah, maybe if you can see the cliff notes, there should be if there's a 3-minute trailer of Gunga Din, watch that. Yeah. That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good.
And then go back and watch RRR twice.
Yeah. I think that sums it up pretty well. Yeah.
Well, so that's been our trip to the Raj. Have we learned something? Well, I think we've learned where Temple of Doom came from.
Yeah.
And we've learned that if you work out hard enough, you can punch a tiger.
Yes.
So those are my 2 take-home messages for these movies. Okay, this has been the Two Real Cinema Club. We will see you next time. Until then, goodbye, and see you next time.
Bye, everybody.